Good morning, everybody. The clipper ships dominated the oceans in the late 1800s, and perhaps the greatest of those was the Cutty Sark, involved in the tea trade and other things. And it was on this date in 1869, on November 22, that the Cutty Sark was launched. This is a map of the Silk Route. So it not only carried silk, but it also carried spices from China through Central Asia to the Eastern Mediterranean and then into Western Europe. And when the Silk Road closed around 1500, Europeans were looking for other ways to get the spices from here, the Spice Islands, which basically Indonesia. So this is one of the reasons long-distance sailing really got started at that time period. So this map of the trading routes in the Atlantic reminds us that the Americans did lots of sailing along their own coast and then down into the Caribbean and into Central America. So we were doing all kinds of ship innovations, a lot of ship designs. The shipyards along the East Coast were trying new ways of building ships, and out of that came the clipper ship. And this is probably the first one. It's a replica of what was known as the Baltimore Clipper, from the word clip, to move really fast, like clip along. And around the same time period, the East India Company was formed in England with the goal of increasing trade with what was known as the Indies. That would be India, Indonesia, mainland East Asia. And one of the products was opium, which comes from the sap of the opium poppy, which you see here. But by far the biggest product for the clipper ships was tea. And our ship, the Cutty Sark, became known as one of the great ships for carrying tea back and forth between Asia and Europe. Now this is the Flying Cloud. This is our first clipper ship, built in the 1840s, so about 20 years before the Cutty Sark. And it really became famous during the gold rush. So when gold was discovered in California in 1848, 1849, people wanted to get from the East Coast to the West Coast, and there were a bunch of ways you could do it. And one of them was to sail around the bottom of South America. Another way would be to sail to Panama and then go across the isthmus and then take another ship. And the Flying Cloud set the record for going around South America in 89 days, which was really amazing. And here's a picture going through the waters at Cape Horn in South America. And imagine that in the winter when everything is freezing. I mean, this is tough sailing. But here's the Cutty Sark. It was launched on this date, November 22 in 1869. It was bigger than the Flying Cloud. It was faster. And it was known for its runs out to Asia and back. It carried tea initially. It carried other things. But this was just a world-famous ship. And Twining, who imported tea, Twinings is still around today, had Cutty Sark on one of its tea tins. But eventually that great age of sail came to an end, at least on the big scale, and it was because of steam power. If you have coal in your hold and you have a steam engine going, you don't need to worry about the wind, for instance. And then another thing that ended the clipper ship era was the building of the Panama Canal in the early 1900s. So no need to sail around South America anymore. You could take the canal through Panama. So the name Cutty Sark lives on in whiskey, and you see it in porcelain and decorative dishes. But the ship is still there. It's in Greenwich, which is downstream from downtown London. Here it is. It had a big fire a while ago, but it's been completely rebuilt and restored. And not that long ago, Dorothy and I were in London, and we visited it. And here's a picture I took of the hull with its copper sheathing. We were really surprised how big the Cutty Sark is. And as you walk along the deck and you see all the masts and where all the sails were, it's just amazing that they could make the ship go as fast as it did. But they did, and it was a real treat to be on the Cutty Sark, one of the great ships of the age of sail in Britain, a big maritime power.